Hi, everyone. I'm Congressman Harley Ruda. Thank you for joining us here today, and especially thanks to the panel for joining us as well while we discuss this very important topic addressing and affecting our schools here in Orange County. Before we get to the discussion today, I want to remind everyone my office has been doing these tele-discussions on specific issues to help our community better understand how we navigate through COVID-19. And these issues aren't just for the immediate time frame, but many of these will impact us for months, if not years to come. In fact, just last month, I had an opportunity to discuss mental health services amid this pandemic with the Orange County Psychological Association and Assemblywoman Cotty Petrie Norris. We know that mental health is going to become an even bigger issue as we continue to navigate through these troubling times, and that we going to have the resources and support to address an increasing mental health crisis in our country. We also know that today, how we teach and deliver education has been dramatically altered by this pandemic. We know that many kids have struggled to make the transition, no fault of their own, but simply because they don't have access to the tools they need to be able to navigate in these new times. And that could be simply having access to a computer and having access to broadband high-speed internet. Candidly, high-speed internet and broadband is what running water and electricity was to previous generations. It's an absolute must in today's world. And I'm fully committed to making sure that we have broadband available in all of our communities, including rural and urban communities many have not had access to these tools as they need it. We've done quite a bit in what we've passed at the federal level, including approximately $31 billion for the Education Stabilization Fund for the sole purpose of helping schools offset the cost associated with responding to COVID-19. But we also know that we've got a long way to go, and that's why I'm so happy to have these panelists with us today to help us understand where are the challenges, how do we prioritize effective results for our students while maintaining safety for them and the staff and our teachers and professors as well. So with that, let me introduce the panelists. Al Mijares, and I hopefully am pronouncing that correctly, is the Orange County Superintendent of Schools and previously served as the Vice President of the College Board and the Superintendent of the Santa Ana Unified School District. As Superintendent, he oversees more than 600 schools and 50,000 students. John Weisfenning currently serves as the Chancellor of the Coast Community College District. That district includes Coastline Community College, Golden West College, and Orange Coast College. The Coast Community College District is recognized as one of the leading community college districts in the country and offers instruction in more than 300 degrees and certificate programs. And then finally, Willie Banks Jr. serves as the Vice Chancellor of the Student Affairs at the University of California, Irvine. He oversees the program for student development outside the classroom and includes wellness services and cross-cultural communication. Again, thanks to all of you for being here today. I touched on this in my opening remarks, but would like you guys to jump in a little bit more and explain in greater detail the problems your institutions have encountered as a result of COVID-19 and what you've done to address them. And I know that these challenges were so substantive because of the speed in which they hit us, your ability to respond quickly. I applaud all of you and your institutions for doing so. So tell us a little bit more, again, about those problems and how you've addressed them. Superintendent, you want to lead us off? You might be on mute.
I was on mute. Can you hear me now?
We can.
Okay. I was thanking you for including me in the panel and for being here with both John and Willie. and all of you that are out there, thank you. It's an honor, quite frankly. I think you mentioned 50,000 students, but it's 500,000 in Orange County. And maybe I didn't hear that correctly, Congressman. But we have over 500,000 students in the county. We're one of the largest county of the 58 counties, as you know. And we do a number of things to serve our students, largely in the K-12 system. And we do have interaction on a number of fronts with our community colleges as well. And naturally, we interact with the four-year institutions as well. But yes, it's indeed hard to believe that just a few weeks ago we were going through the normal routines of providing high quality education for our K-12 students, and almost within a nanosecond we found ourselves dismissing students from school. And now where we're at today, it's nothing short of a miracle. And you think of the phenomena, meaning that these two phenomenons that have collided, COVID-19 and what we're finding in terms of the matter of people demonstrating on the streets in reference to Mr. Floyd, who lost his life terribly. And I know that we've all been shaken to, in terms of the foundations of our core. And we're now confronted with how do these things coalesce in the classroom, and how do we make sense of them, and how do we do everything we can to assure that there's equity and that our eyes are upon the students, the needs of our students. Our superintendents, we have 27 school districts in the county, as you know, so our superintendents have been actively engaged along with their staff members in producing a plan that will guide us through the reopening of schools. But there are a host of questions that need to be answered first, and we're waiting for guidance. I don't mean that we're sitting here twiddling our thumbs. Obviously, we're very active in the development of the plan, but we are waiting for final guidance from the California Department of Education and the California Department of Public Health, and naturally, we've worked with the CDC. So it's a daunting task. You can't capture the attention of people any faster than when you start to deal with their children. Parents, I know, are exasperated on a number of fronts. Childcare is one of them. The governor, when he issued his executive order, he said that the educational program must continue. So I like to say that we've dismissed students from school, but we have not closed our schools, because education is continuing, and it's happening through online education. We're using WebEx in the county here. Zoom is also being used, but WebEx fundamentally, and it's the management system that we're using is Canvas. And as many of you know, Dr. Weissenfein, I know he knows this very well. Canvas is used heavily in the community college system, but it's actually a K on up to the university system form of managing your course content and delivering the courses, with fidelity. That has been a challenge in many cases. I know, Congressman, you've been very interested in connectivity and the use of devices. I'm happy to report that we have over 90% connectivity across the county, and that same number reflects in terms of the access to a device. We have a little bit of challenge because sometimes everybody's at home, the shelter in place, and they're drawing down on Netflix through Netflix, Hulu, and other sources, and it does draw down power, which is another complication. But I think that we're moving forward, and in a way that I believe you would be proud.
And let me ask you, before I go to the Chancellor, a quick follow-up question. As you have made that transition and the students are virtually 100% online in their education and also working with their parents, we're going to get back to normal at some point. We're going to get back to classroom teaching. But do you see, when we get to that day, that you will still incorporate tele-learning in some capacity and marry the two together?
Absolutely. Online education has been used largely to augment the classroom, augment the instructional program, reinforce concepts that have been introduced in the class by the teacher. But right now it is driving the instructional program. And across the state, there's varying degrees as to the success of the online program, e-schooling. How is it being conducted? And we weren't prepared to jump in with both feet and, in a sense, displace the eyeball to eyeball instructional program, in the classroom, interacting with your peers and your teacher, replace that with online education and expecting the same outcome. We're working very hard to determine that there is no regression, that students are not receding, they're not going backwards, but they're going forward. So I think from this point on, the online programs are getting stronger and stronger, and that is an asset. That's a tremendous benefit. You can say, has anything good come of COVID-19? And I would say, as daunting as it is and challenging, this is one of the things that I think is going to help us in the future.
Thank you. And Chancellor, same question, but let me approach it maybe slightly different, because I'm curious, when this all hits and you're dealing with multiple campuses, and to move as quickly as you did to being basically online with all these students, how do you do that? I mean, what is the process to be able to move that quickly and effectively?
We had a little bit of warning here, because by late February, it became clear that there was a potential disruption to our instructional capacity as a district. And so I put together a group of individuals to monitor the situation and make recommendations, so that by the time we got to mid-March, we were fully prepared to close instruction for a week, which then gave our faculty that week plus the spring break week, which was following. So they had 2 weeks to prepare classes to go online. Some of our classes were already online. Coastline College is about 80 to 90% online at any given moment. But Orange Coast and Golden West are mostly face-to-face institutions, although each class did have its own Canvas shell, as we call it. As my friend Al mentioned, Canvas. Many of those faculty used it simply to supplement what they were doing in the classroom, not really as a medium of instruction. And so during those 2 weeks, our faculty members went through some additional training, those who hadn't taught previously online, and they began working with each other to figure out, how do we take what we've been doing in the classroom and make it work effectively online? And it was really a massive effort, and our faculty stepped up and did tremendous work. And so by the end of those 2 weeks, we had moved literally thousands of classes from face-to-face instruction to online instruction. I couldn't have imagined us doing it prior to this, but it really was a testament to the great men and women who work on our faculty that they were able to make that happen.
Well, hats off to you and all of the institutions you represent, as well as the others, because it's been a yeoman's job. And to see our teachers, our professors, our staff come together and effectively make that transition in the time frame they have under the circumstances they were facing, as a testament to your commitment to the education of our young adults. Vice Chancellor, I'll move to you now. From a UCI standpoint, can you talk a little bit about the challenges you faced?
Sure, and just like my other colleagues have mentioned, the instruction part was a challenge. And for UCI, we already had almost 30% of our classes online. So, but it still was a monumental feat to get all of the instruction online. I think one of the interesting parts about UCI is that we house about 15,500 students on campus. And so one of the interesting challenges for us was actually to de-densify the campus. And so that posed a number of issues and challenges for us. But by mid-March, we had made the decision that we needed about 9,500 of our students to actually go home or go to their permanent residences. So that was a huge challenge. And I think when we think about this from the student perspective, for those who've moved to UCI and to have a collegiate career, and we're a residential campus, part of their collegiate experience is to live on campus. And so in the middle of the school year, to say you need to go return home, I think was a huge shock to their system. And so for us, we had to really think about, how do we encourage people to go home, but then also how do we make accommodations for those students that didn't have a home to go to, that this was their home. And so we wanted to make sure that they still felt comfortable here, that we were still providing them services around meals. Because we do have about 50% of our students are from low income, first generation college students. And we don't know every situation for every one of our students, but I think it's important to remember that when we've asked our students to go back home, their home situation may not have been the best situation for them to return to. So we had to keep that in mind. The other piece is that because we have so many students that are from low-income, first-generation families, you know, when they went back home, the entire emphasis may not have been on their collegiate career. It may be, we need for you to go to work, we need for you to help support the family, we need for you to help take care of the family, when, as opposed to when they're on campus, they can really focus on their academics. So it's a shift. The other piece that I do want to mention is that for a number of our students struggling financially and also having the resources to actually do remote learning. We did have concerns as far as some of our students not having the equipment. And just as you mentioned earlier, the broadband Wi-Fi issue for our students to complete actual coursework and to stay on track was an issue. And thankfully, we were able to provide some of our students with the equipment that they needed. So laptops, Wi-Fi, hotspots, those types of things. But we have continued to remain and provide services for our students, everything from our counseling center, and then also from recreation, our resource centers, and even our basic needs center are still providing support for our students because we understand that this is a very difficult, challenging time for our students. And we wanted them to make sure that they still felt connected to UCI and to understand that as Anteaters, we're here for them.
So yesterday I attended a rally to end racism in Newport Beach, and there were probably 1,000 plus people there, families, and a lot of young adults. A lot of young adults in high school and college. Many of them seniors. Many of them not having the graduation they envisioned that they would have. And I'm curious from all of your standpoints, you know, how do you deal with the fact that these graduating high school seniors, these graduating college seniors, these are huge times in their lives, huge achievements that they are not able to participate in as we had and all students typically do. There has to be deep anguish, maybe mental health issues. How do you navigate through that with them? And I'll start with you, Vice Chancellor.
Yeah, well, I will say that UCI was one of the first institutions to actually publicly say out loud that we were canceling commencement. And from my Twitter feed, our students were not pleased with that. And so we dealt with a number of students that were quite upset. And I try to remind people that I'm a first-generation college student myself, and I understand the importance of participating in commencement. What I am proud of, though, is that we have been able to rally and to figure out a virtual commencement that's happening next Saturday. And it's going to be at 10 a.m., but we've had over 7,400 graduates actually sign up to participate in commencement. And I'm quite proud of that because I think it shows the resiliency and the understanding and the compassion and the grace of our students to understand that we want to help them celebrate. We understand the importance of commencement, but we also have to take into consideration the health and safety of everyone, and also helping them understand that just coming into the Brent at this point in time for a number of days for commencement was just not going to be the wisest choice for us. So we have really tried to do outreach. We're doing a series of videos as far as unboxing. When each of our graduates who register to participate will receive a UCI graduation box. That includes like a mortar board and a tassel, a UCI frame, car frame for their license plate, and some other things. But you know, it's really about celebrating them, but then also hoping that we can have an in-person commencement ceremony in December. But that's all, you know, pending restrictions or guidance from the CDC and also from Orange County, and if we can actually have large gatherings at that point in time.
And are you doing that on a Zoom call?
Oh, for the virtual graduation, yeah, it starts off with a common space, and then each of the 13 schools will then have their own separate reception for each of their graduates. And each of those graduates that registered, they were able to submit their picture. And so it would say Harley Ruda, Bachelor of Arts, and you would actually see your picture. And so that's a moment for them to celebrate. So, I mean, that's part of the excitement of commencement, is getting to walk across the stage. You know, we'll zot together, but there will be no physical contact. So,
gotcha. Al, John, anything to add?
Well, I would say that we are doing the virtual commencements also. Coastline did theirs a week ago, and Orange Coast and Golden West are coming up. Golden West is also planning to do a drive-by graduation so that students can parade in their cars across the campus while faculty and staff, socially distanced, are there to applaud them in their accomplishments.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I think that the most lamentable thing about this, or problem, is the very fact that students almost upon birth, you dream of your child going to college perhaps, or certainly graduating from high school, and to not see them walk across the stage and get their diploma and be cheered and extolled by their peers and family members and so forth, that is really difficult. Parents are having a hard time. Yes, we're doing virtual graduations will take place. We too are doing drive-bys with the smaller schools who have a smaller graduating class, where the car comes up, student gets out of the vehicle, goes up to a platform, picks up their diploma. Nobody's handing it to them because of spacing and distancing. It gets back in the car and they're cheering, and then they drive off. So we do have parents, though, and schools that are hoping that perhaps come August, things may be different. There's no guarantees here. We've had parents say, hey, we don't care if you do it in the fall. We just want a graduation. So I think it's a little more complex when you're dealing with minors. Not that it should take anything away from those that are graduating from the university or the community college system, but we are having a hard time with that, to be honest.
And now let me ask you this too, because I know that food security is a huge issue for so many of our students. And with the number of students you serve from an academic standpoint, you also serve from a food standpoint. And with the schools being closed, many of these students were not getting access, at least there was initial fear that they would not get access to regularly scheduled meals. But I know that you've addressed that issue. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, that was an imperative from the governor in his first executive order that he issued, and that was that the food services program continue. So we do have a program in all of our districts across Orange County. You've heard it often referred to as grab and go, where families come and they drive in and they're able to get food. We make accommodations for those that can't get to the school to receive food. We are pretty generous in how it's distributed. This is part of the federal government's program of the free and reduced priced education for young people. But frankly, we've had so much help beyond what we're doing. There's a number of community-based organizations such as churches that are also offering to deliver food and bring food to people. So the benevolence of the county is very striking, and it's very encouraging to see the goodwill of people, the kindness to be willing to help those who need this type of service.
Yeah, it certainly is. And I've participated in a few food banks, volunteering on Saturdays and some weekdays here and there. And the need is extraordinary, and the outpouring of volunteerism and support from the community is outstanding and warms your heart, no doubt about that. But we know we've got a long way to go.
Right.
John, let me turn to you a little bit, because I think the governor has laid out guidelines for schools opening up. So I'm just kind of curious, as you've looked at those guidelines, do you envision opening up in the fall? I know that because many of your campuses are already so much online, perhaps you have an easier path towards that outcome than maybe the other two panelists. What are your thoughts?
Well, we do not have clearance yet from the state to open the campuses, but we're anticipating that could happen sometime during the fall semester. As a result of that not being decided yet, in order for faculty to have time to plan, we made the announcement that we would be online this summer and mostly online in the fall. There are some things that we teach that, quite frankly, just can't be done through the internet. Welding comes to mind as a great example of that. And so we are planning to open up a few limited programs in that way with face-to-face instruction, following social distancing and having some other protective measures in place. But that will be a small number of programs. The majority of our coursework will be online this fall.
Thank you. Vice Chancellor, how about you?
Sure, we are still in discussions as far as what the fall will look like. And I know that's a question that a number of students and also families and also our faculty and staff have. But we're looking at all of the options, and we may have to have a hybrid model as far as some online classes that will remain, possibly for our large lecture classes. But then also, just like John mentioned, there are some classes, possibly graduate programs, that just cannot really translate to the online environment. Think about fine arts programs, acting classes, dance classes. Some of those things may have to happen in smaller classes, but also adhering to CDC guidelines. And also, we're also concerned about how many students can we bring back into our residence halls. Because we, believe in a residential experience of having people on campus, but we have to think about, what can we actually do and following within guidelines to bring people back to campus. So we're still in discussions, but we're hopeful that we can have some answers within the next couple of weeks to provide some guidance for families.
And Superintendent, same question, because I also would imagine there's a even elevated level of desire by parents to see these schools open due to the impact it has on them in their, and just how they manage their lives and work and so on. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it has been difficult for parents, particularly those who need childcare. They've rested on the fact that their children would be in school for most of the day, and that enabled them to go to work and contribute to the workforce, and thereby to contribute to the economy. What we are looking at is opening in some way or another. Most of our districts will open in August. We're planning around the clock right now, probably for a blended learning model, where you will have students engaged in their classrooms. We're going to maintain the spacing that's required right now by our health officer here in the county. But how it will look, we're just not quite sure at this moment. A lot of it has to do with, because we haven't received the final guidance from the state, but also we're all facing, as all of those on the call today, this cataclysmic picture with the budget. So if, the governor is saying to reduce your budgets by 8 to 10%, which was his first comment, the legislature, as you know, it has come up very recently, as early as last night, where both the Assembly and the Senate of the General Assembly have not bought onto that. They're saying that there's other ways to mitigate the deficit that we're facing, the so-called $54 billion deficit. So if we move to the spacing elements that have been put in place right now, it would require us to put less students in a classroom. So let's just assume you loaded your classrooms at 1 to 30 or 28. You probably can only get 15 students into that classroom given the square footage of the average classroom. So now you're going to need potentially another classroom, which means you may need another teacher. And how do you do all that in the midst of having to shrink your budgets, not grow them, or not have them expand? So see, there's a lot of unanswered questions now, but I think it will probably fall to a matter of, or will resolve on the matter of having a blended model of seat time in the classroom with teachers and their peers, and especially in grades K-6, where you can use the so-called cohort element of protecting students from the virus itself. And, I think we can do that in the lower grades, in the middle school, in high school. It's a whole different situation. But I'm optimistic, though. I'm very hopeful that we will have a model in place that will keep our kids safe and also continue with the instructional program.
And I'm hopeful the HEROES Act that I supported and passed the House will pass in some form and be signed into law, because we definitely have to provide support for states and municipalities so that the cuts that you're discussing can hopefully be avoided, and we can continue to have high quality education. Chancellor, Vice Chancellor, this question is for you. It is two questions. You've got a incoming class in the fall. One, are admissions down, or are they staying the same because of the pandemic? And two, how do you welcome an incoming freshman class into the situation we're dealing with?
Well, we actually bring our students in a little bit later in the summer, so we don't really even begin tracking enrollments for fall until we get to July. Right now, we expect our enrollments will be about even with last year, because while some students may not be in a position to take classes this fall as they otherwise would, we do suspect there are a number of students who live locally who might otherwise have gone to university or colleges in other states, and they may be inclined to stay closer to home in the fall, and we're expecting them to register at community colleges. So we think the impact on our student enrollments will actually be minimal for the fall.
Interesting. Vice Chancellor.
Very similar. You know, we have an amazing admissions and enrollment management team. And from my understanding of the numbers, it looks pretty steady, which is very hopeful for us. I think that students want to be a part of UCI and part of the UC system, so we're excited about that. But we're keeping an eye on that because those things can change. And also the delivery of instruction could have an effect on that. But so we're keeping an eye on that. How do we welcome them to campus? Typically, there'd be a lot of fanfare. We would have SPOP, which is our orientation program throughout the summer. That will be delivered remotely to our students and throughout the summer, and we hope to keep them engaged. If we are allowed to have students back on campus in the fall, we will do some online programming and also some face-to-face programming to make sure to welcome those students back on campus. But it's going to be, you know, I think really about bringing people back to campus. We're going to push education. We're going to push the guidelines that are provided by the CDC as far as social distancing, hand washing, space, and then also telling people to take care of themselves and to check their symptoms every day. And if they're not feeling well, do not go outside, stay inside, monitor your health. And so it's going to be a big push. And then also the use of face coverings and really encouraging students to make sure that they're utilizing face coverings. And so we view this as, if we allowed to bring students back to campus, this is a whole community. This is just not going to be on the students, but everyone has a responsibility to each other and to the greater community, to Orange County, to Irvine, to the state of California, to make sure that we try to keep these numbers low as far as infection rates and making sure that people remain healthy and safe.
And this question is for all three of you. You have students now, you have students coming back in the fall or summer, perhaps in certain cases. Some of these students, many of these students, have COVID-19 related hardship issues that need to be addressed. Where do these students go for your respective institutions to get help? Chancellor, we'll start with you.
Well, we have most of our student services are available online. And I want to note that Orange Coast College is opening up a residence facility for students, student housing beginning this fall. And so we will be bringing back some services on the campus to make sure that those students who are in our residence facility have access to resources. But beyond that, we've been making a lot of use of our community partners, the area food banks. We've been making use of housing referrals for students who are housing insecure. And I want to thank you, Congressman, for your leadership on the CARES Act, because as a result of that, we've put almost $7 million directly into the hands of our students already this spring to help them with these financial needs that they have as a result of COVID-19.
That's great news. I'm glad to hear that. Vice Chancellor?
Sure. Very similarly, we actually have a basic needs hub on campus, and they have continued to provide services for our students. And even when this first happened, it was made very clear from our student population that one of their concerns was the access that they had to the Fresh Hub and also the food pantry. And so we made a concerted effort to make sure that we were following guidelines and also able to still provide those residents and our students and their families with the needs as far as food. We also still have our campus social work office that are providing support for our students, albeit remotely. And then also our financial aid office have been working and has been working on distributing funds to our students. And I believe as of May 22nd, almost 18,000 students had received emergency funds from the CARES Act. And so I do want to echo the thank you for that support, because our students need it. And it's been very clear that this has impacted a number. I think everyone has been impacted in some way, shape, or form from this, but especially for our students. They need the help, they need the assistance, and for them to continue with their American dream, we've got to step up and we've got to support them and help them.
Thank you. Superintendent?
Yes. as you all know, the number of minors actually contracting the virus is very low in our county. It's low across the nation. I think the CDC said that only 3 minors, that is those under the age of 18, actually lost their lives to the virus. So you can see that for some reason, young people are able to manage this virus if they do get it. There's great debate as to whether they can be carriers of it to infect adults. And you know, I've heard just different stories of this. We actually are working with about 5 medical doctors. One of them is Dr. Dan Cooper from UCI. He's a pediatric pulmonologist, renowned individual. His print is national. We also have Dr. Michael Weiss. He's a pediatrician from CHOC, so CHOC's very involved. And then we have our healthcare agency director, that's Clayton Chow, who's a he's both a medical doctor and he's done residencies, I think, in family practice, also psychiatry. And then we have Dr. Nicole Quick, who is our medical officer as well, along with Dr. Zahn. So they're helping, guiding. They're part of the reopening of schools task force. And through those people, those agencies across the county, we've been able to manage so that if we have people that come in with who may be showing symptoms, we want to get them in as soon as possible for testing, you know, as ASAP for testing. And then we go from there. Nobody has been turned away that I know of who has the need.
Thank you. So last question, and Al, I'll stick with you, but we'll get to the other 2 as well. Last question, if you could have Congress do one thing, what would you want me to go back to Washington, D.C. and fight for?
That's a great question. And some of my colleagues have already thanked you, and I want to thank you also for the CARES Act. You know, it did bring in $4.4 billion into the state, which will be disseminated across over 1,000 districts. And it will definitely mitigate the financial problems we're having. But I would say that continue to support us financially. As you know, California does not rank high in terms of its per pupil spending. So when we have these kinds of, and by the way, juxtapose that to the demography that we face. We're the largest state, you know, 6.2 million students in our K-12 system. A quarter of those students are English speakers. Our poverty rate across California is higher than 50%. You know, so you have a very challenging demography, and the per pupil spending is lower than the national average. So continue to support us financially. I think that's the best thing you can do, and continue to fight for equity in the classroom.
Thank you. Vice Chancellor.
I just want to echo that. I think the advocacy for the state of California and also for public higher education is important, and also the funding piece. And I think that is very, very important. I think the other piece that I'm quite proud of is to be in California, because I think California as a state has really led the way in how to manage this crisis. And so I think anything that we can do to continue to listen to the science, to not fall to pressure, to open too early, to really advocate for higher education, especially research universities, and just higher education and education in general, is going to help us in the long run. Because it's collaborations between UCI and other entities around healthcare that's going to really solve this problem. And I think that's where people need to remember, is that we can't do that if we don't have the funding to continue the research and to continue to be open and to serve the greater good.
Thank you. Chancellor.
Well, I certainly would agree with the Vice Chancellor and the Superintendent. The HEROES Act, thank you for helping that get through the House as it awaits consideration in the Senate. That's really going to be key for us in the community college sector in terms of whether we can really meet our mission that we're going to be asked to do over the next year or 2. So that financial support from the federal government to the state is absolutely vital.
Thank you. Thank you, Chancellor. Thanks to all of our panelists. I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today on this important topic. I also want to emphasize, I can't agree with all of you more about how important education is. education in our K through 12 as well as higher education. When we talk about racial inequality in our country, income inequality, when we talk about equal opportunity, when we talk about the security of our country, the stability of our country, it all results in having a high quality education available to everyone in our country. If we focus on providing that type of education, the one that our kids deserve, so that we have the brightest, best educated workforce in the world, many of the problems we face will be solved. And I hope you'll join me and these panelists in continuing to support education, K through 12, as well as higher education for the benefit of our country. Thank you very much for joining us today, and stay safe out there.
Thank you.